I like the 4 parts of your coaching sessions that you've spoken about. Describe those again for our listeners.
So the first session, we spend time organizing and making sure that we know what's going to happen in the subsequent sessions to set ourselves up for success. But the sessions after that have 4 pieces, and they all start with I. Impact, issue, insight, initiative. So impact is where we always start. What gain or success has the leader had since the last time we were together? And then issue. This is where we spend most of our time talking about what stress or challenge do they have, what's in their face. The third is insight. As a result of discussing the issue, what key learning have they had? Which fresh perspective have they seen something differently? And then initiative. There always has to be action. Because if there is no action to resolve that issue, it's just a nice conversation with the coach. And I don't think that's what coaching is about. I think it's about helping leaders have an impact within their organization.
Is it sometimes hard for them to, for leaders to step outside of themselves and to be able to go through those 4 parts?
Some leaders who love control sometimes like to control the situation, and I'm pretty flexible. I can get to all of those 4 pieces, even though the person thinks they're in control, just because I've been doing it often enough, and we start talking about the issue, we start talking about what's happening, and I ask lots of questions, and then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off, and there's their insight. So I don't say, okay, now let's talk about your insight, right? Sometimes it just appears.
So Valerie, tell us about what you provide during a coaching session with leaders.
I provide 4 things. The first is I bring in tools and processes. So a tool could be a model or a checklist, but it guides our discussion around that issue. For example, if somebody's having trouble communicating with their staff, I might bring in a systems thinking approach to communication. And I have a story for this. Surprise. I worked with a leader of a large organization, and he led a large facility, and there was some cost overruns that he was quite upset about. And he was going to send out an email about what they needed to do differently about these cost overruns. So we used this checklist, this tool, to update the email so it was less about how terrible you guys were and more about what we could do together. And so he got some good feedback as a result of that email, which was really interesting because he never, ever got feedback as a result of his previous emails.
Which brings me to ask just very quickly, Valerie, about the form of communication. We're around technology nonstop, especially emails. Yeah. It's something that I fall into the trap of. I take offense to certain ways that an email can come across because I'm reading it with a certain point of view. Do you have to teach leaders a lot about communicating, and is there a certain way that we should communicate via email, via different sort of social media in order for our colleague or our employees to really benefit from what we're saying?
We always have to be aware of what we want to communicate. Often we just say something without thinking about, well, if Lucy's getting this, what do I want Lucy to do as a result of this communication? Or how is Lucy going to read this? Or what does Lucy know or not know about this? So the checklist that I've got that helps people around communication, we go through lots of those things around what are really the facts here, what facts we want to share, what's known, what assumptions am I making about you or about what you know or about what you did. And it often helps people communicate better.
Excellent. So I'm sorry because I've cut you up there, and we were talking about the different tools that you would bring in depending on the sort of clients that you're working with.
Yeah. So the first one is tools and processes that we talked about, and communication is one that we use a lot. The second one is I bring knowledge in lots of different areas. So it could be those big areas we talked about before, strategic thinking, managing conflict, creating and executing strategic plans. So I'll bring in those kind of knowledges as well. The third thing that I bring is questions. And it sounds pretty simple, but I bring in questions to get the leader to see things differently, to have a fresh perspective, to look at things a little bit differently. So I don't come with answers, but I need to come with those questions to help them come up with their answers. There's a great book, and I just love the title. The title is called Don't Just Do Something, Stand There. It's by Weisberg and Janoff, and it's about running meetings. And my favorite quote there is, do less so that others will do more. So as a coach, I need to let people struggle. I need to let them come up with their answers so that they own it and they want to do something with it, instead of me saying, oh, I've seen this before, you need to do this.
And that's a good point there.
Because, just because I've seen it before, it might not be the right nuance or the right way, or we might come up with something totally different that fits for that person, that person's organization, that person's particular situation.
Excellent.
And the last thing I bring is I bring a safe place to confidentially discuss issues and then talk about those options. Because sometimes there isn't that place to just bounce something off someone and get some feedback from that person who's got no vested interest in it. And so there is a caveat around that confidentiality, though. If the organization needs to know something, like if the person tells me they're planning on quitting or they do something illegal, the organization needs to know that. But other than that, there's confidentiality, and I do tell the person I'm coaching, their leader, a little bit about what's happening, but more it's the areas we're working on and not specifically what's been said. So to recap, 4 things that I bring to a coaching session are tools and processes, knowledge in specific leadership areas, questions, and a safe, confidential place.
Excellent. Now, for listeners again, the number to call in is 818-668-5457 if you have any questions about the topics that we're discussing. So that's what takes place within the sessions. What takes place between the sessions?
Well, when I first started coaching, people used to forget and get busy, not do those actions that we had talked about. And so to support the leader to actually try those new behaviors and step out and do something a little bit different, I've got follow-up coaching via either email or telephone or a combination along the way. Because people really need that support in those first few days to try something new. It's to overcome that static friction. I'm comfortable staying here, and it helps that person move forward. And once they're moving forward, it's so much easier to continue moving forward.
Excellent.
I remember hearing that the majority of energy to send someone to the International Space Station is actually expended in the first few minutes after takeoff. And it's the same thing for changing any leadership behavior. It's those first few tries that are the hardest, and then after that, it's so much easier.